pages of research.
Good evening.
Corners and
And that's when I
districts.
said,
'Cause
yeah,
we were
attorney
talking
has to
about,
go
well,
through
where's
that.
everyone
That's
located
15,000
to have the
pages.
response?
And
She was like,
represent their client.
Yep, they have to go through every page of that. They drop off that cell phone.
Good evening. Welcome to the second and final candidate forum sponsored by Citizens of Delaware County for Good Government, League of Women Voters of Muncie-Delaware County, Muncie Action Plan, Muncie Resists, NAACP Muncie Branch, Shafer Leadership Academy, Women's March Muncie, and the Bowen Center for Public Affairs at Ball State University. I'm Charles Taylor, Senior Fellow of the Bowen Center for Public Affairs. I'll be your moderator this evening. We'd like to thank all our volunteers, along with Muncie Community Schools and Muncie Central High School, for allowing us to hold the forum here. Finally, we'd like to thank WIPB, who's recording these forums and providing a live stream video feed, and Wolf Boom Radio, who's broadcasting these forums on WMUN 92.5 FM, 1340 AM, as well as providing access to the live stream on its Facebook pages. The purpose of these forums is to give the public a chance to submit their questions to candidates for positions on this year's ballot and hear the candidates' answers. Volunteers are distributing index cards and pencils for you to submit your questions. We ask that you focus your questions on issues that are within the responsibility of these candidates here tonight, and that you try to keep them short and to the point. Tonight's first panel has candidates for a variety of county offices. We expect that many of your questions will apply to all offices, but you may have questions for a specific office. For example, asking the sheriff candidates about something specific about the jail. If that is the case, please indicate the office on your question card. We'll try to have a mix of general and specific questions, but I won't limit which questions the candidates respond to. You may see a connection between the issue and the office you seek, even if it wasn't directed at candidates for your office, so please answer any question you wish. Two of our committee members, Jim Arnold of Citizens of Delaware County for Good Government and Sarah Vitale of Muncie Resists, will be screening the questions to ensure that they meet those two criteria, that they're relevant and brief. And my political science colleague, Chad Kinsella, will sort the questions by topic area and pass them up to me. We may also have a question or two tonight that were submitted by the students in Ms. Snyder's government class here at Muncie Central High School. Our first panel tonight will be for county offices other than commissioner or council. We had that last week. And our second panel will be for legislative candidates. All candidates for sheriff, prosecutor, judge, coroner, clerk, recorder, auditor, and assessor were invited for this first panel, but unfortunately not all were able to participate. From now until about 7:30, we will hear from the candidates who joined us tonight. At the end of that panel, there will be a short break while we reset the stage, and then we'll have the second panel. After I introduce these candidates, each one will make a 2-minute opening statement. After their opening statements, we will ask as many questions as time allows. Candidates will have 1 minute to answer, rotating and responding. Our timekeeper will indicate when 30 seconds are remaining and when the time is up, and so I ask candidates to keep an eye on the timekeeper. After the questioning is done, each candidate will have 2 minutes for a closing statement. We ask that you hold your reactions during the forum and hold your applause, except for now when we greet the candidates, and so I will introduce them. Dave Williams is the Democratic candidate for sheriff. Tony Skinner is a Republican candidate and incumbent sheriff. Gavin Green is a Republican candidate for coroner. Ryan Davis is the Democratic candidate for coroner. Rick Spangler is a Republican candidate and incumbent clerk. Shelley Harvey is the Democratic candidate for clerk. Judy Calhoun is a Republican candidate for judge, Circuit Court 1. She is unable to be with us tonight. Amanda Dunnick is the Democratic candidate for judge, Circuit Court 1. Eric Hoffman is the Democratic candidate and incumbent prosecutor. Efforts to contact Mr. Hoffman were unsuccessful. Jan Smoot is a Republican candidate for recorder. Efforts to contact Ms. Smoot were unsuccessful. Ed Carroll is a Republican candidate for auditor. He is unable to be with us tonight. James Carmichael is a Republican candidate and incumbent assessor. Efforts to contact Mr. Carmichael were unsuccessful. So thank you all for being here tonight. Okay, now each candidate may make a 2-minute opening statement, and Mr. Williams, you may go first.
I am Dave Williams. I'm a sergeant with the Delaware County Sheriff's Office. I'm a lifetime resident here. I was born and raised. I was born here in Muncie, Indiana, Ball Hospital. I grew up on the south side of town. Excuse me. 3 children. I'm married. My children go to Delta Middle School and Delta High School. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my career. I started in corrections in 1995. In 95, I was at the state penitentiary, and then I got hired with the Sheriff's Department as a correctional officer. As a correctional officer, I tried to excel myself from the beginning. Any class or any certification that I had, or that was the opportunity to get, I tried to get. So from as a correction officer, I started at the bottom. I started in the jail, and I started with feeding the inmates, and just like anybody else, it starts at the bottom, and I tried to work myself up to the top. So by the end of my career in corrections, I was certified in several different areas. I ran midnight shift as the midnight shift corporal. During that time, I did payroll. I was a leader at the emergency response team, cell extraction team. Any certification that I could get, I tried to get. So at that time, I really said, you know what, I really want to be a police officer. So during my career as a correctional officer, I decided, you know, I really want to be a police officer. So I made a point and a goal to become a police officer, and then I eventually got hired as a merit deputy on the Sheriff's Department, and I've been there ever since. Now I'm currently on day shift. I'm the sergeant, and I run day shift. Everyday activity, daily things that need to be done as the day shift supervisor, I handle that. The things that I'd like to tell you a little bit more about, but I don't have time off.
Hi, I'm Sheriff Tony Skinner, and I'm running for re-election to be your next Delaware County Sheriff. I'm 53 years old. I've been married for 20 years to my lovely wife, April, who's sitting right there in the middle of the auditorium. We have 2 kids, LT and Lauren, who's also out there. And we also have 2 granddaughters. The oldest one just turned 2 last weekend. My education, I've got a bachelor's degree in criminal justice from the University of Southern Mississippi. I also have a master's degree in public administration from Ball State University. I've been in law enforcement for 27 years, all of that with the Delaware County Sheriff's Office. Like Dave, I also started my career with the Sheriff's Office as a corrections officer and literally made it all the way to the top. During my time with the Sheriff's Office, I've served in every division on our department, from corrections to the courts to training. I spent 7 years as a drug task force investigator. I've worked all 3 shifts, and I've supervised all 3 shifts. During my first term in office, I think we've made great strides in training and programming in the jail, in drug enforcement, and by putting more deputies on the road. And those are some of the things that you'll hear about tonight, my experience in leading those and the things that we've done, and my vision for the future. So again, I'm Sheriff Tony Skinner. I'm here because I'm running for re-election, so bring on the questions.
Hi, my name is Gavin Green. I'm running for coroner. I'm currently the Chief Deputy Coroner with Delaware County. I've been in the position for roughly 3.5 years. I'm a certified medicological death investigator. That's one of the requirements you need in order to be a coroner. I can't wait for the questions that come from the audience tonight. It'll be great to interact with everyone to get along with, to see how the office works. I just want to say thank you very much to Ball State University, along with all the other groups that put this together, so thank you very much for that. There's 3 things that I'd like to bring to this office: compassion, investigation, and collaboration. The collaboration is working with the Delaware County Sheriff's Office, the Crash Reconstruction Team, their investigators, along with the Muncie Police Department. Them working together with them helps all the investigation. If there is any crime being committed or has been committed, we all work together to put that through. With the investigation side with that, I'm also a reserve with the Muncie Police Department. I've been in that position for roughly 11 years now, and that gives me an insight to work side by side with all of those police officers. And the compassion. I've worked over 200 cases. I've talked with family members. I've cried with people. I've supported them as well. And I think that that's one thing that you always need to make sure that you bring to this office. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Ryan Davis. I'm running for coroner. I have lived in Delaware County for approximately the last 9 years. My background, I have spent 10 years working in public safety, primarily in emergency medical services as an EMT, and then later on as a paramedic. I have spent my entire career in public safety working here in Delaware County. I live here in Muncie with my wife Sarah and our 4 children. Our 2 older boys attend Royerton Elementary. And I am running for coroner because I believe that people deserve respect and compassion and dignity in death. 10 years ago when I started my career in public safety, it was something I never thought I would be able to do or have any interest in doing. And over the years, I've personally had the chance to sit with family members and share with them in some of their darkest hours. And I believe that the individuals that are responding when that time comes need to be people that are going to have some compassion, are going to be able to sit down and take the time to explain the process. So many different family members I've encountered in my career just don't know what to do in that moment, and they just need somebody to help guide them. I too want to thank everybody for coming out tonight, listening to what the candidates have to say, and I want to thank you as voters in Delaware County for coming out and listening to what we have to say as well.
The sound booth has asked me to remind the candidates to slide the microphone a little closer to them when you answer.
Hi, I'm Rick Spangler. I am your current Delaware County Clerk, and I am running for re-election for that position. I have been married to Marilyn Dobbs. Okay, sure can. Is that good? I am married to Marilyn Dobbs Spangler. We've been married for the last 50 years. We have 2 sons, 2 beautiful granddaughters, and 6 fantastic grandkids. We spend most of our time, free time I should say, chasing grandkids and watching soccer games and football games and baseball games and whatever they want to do. We want to be there to support them. I have been a private businessman all my life. I started out owning a Honda motorcycle dealership with my father. We sold that business. I started an American Family Insurance Agency, spent 27 years, great years with American Family, and was actually moving toward retirement when I got involved in politics. I've spent 4 years on the county council. I spent 3.5 years in HR developing health plans for the county, and the last 4 years as clerk of the circuit courts. This job has been probably my most rewarding job of my whole life. I actually ran for clerk because I wanted to be involved in the elections. And the first year, the first day, was the most shocking day of my life because I found out what the clerk really does. And that is a very, very busy office. We have 23 full-time employees, and the paperwork of the courts, child support, everything we do has to move fluently and has to get out to people, and we are a very, very busy office. My goals for this office, I've stated since day one, I want to bring free, fair, and transparent elections to Delaware County. When I took over in 2019, there wasn't a Republican in the voter registration office. We turned that around. I now have a bipartisan office. I have 2 people that have graduated from Ball State SEATS program that are just wonderful for our office. Thank you guys, and I'll have more to say later.
Hi, I'm Shelley Harvey, and I too am running for Delaware County Clerk. I have lived in Muncie with my husband of 26 years, and we have 1 son and 1 granddaughter. I started out working in a local law firm right out of college. I have a bachelor's degree in legal administration with a business option, which is all the accounting and the business classes. And then I went to work for Judge Robert Barnett, where I worked for 10 years as his assistant court reporter, and then went to work for Judge Mary Ann Voorhees and was her court reporter for 13 years. After that, I moved to the Public Defender's Office, where I am currently the office administrator of the Public Defender's Office. I have gone in front of county council for budget purposes and for our office. And I work with the State Public Defender Commission in getting a 40% reimbursement, and I have to file paperwork quarterly with the State Public Defender Commission to make sure that the county gets reimbursed. I've learned a lot in my position, and I feel like I too want elections to be as fair and transparent as we all want them to be, and that it's a very important office, and I feel like I've been working toward that goal since I started my career in the legal field. So I thank you for coming tonight, and I thank the steering committee and everybody for hosting us.
Hi, my name is Amanda Dunnick. Is that loud enough? I am current judge of Muncie City Court, currently running for County Court, Circuit Court Number 1, to follow Marianne Voorhees in her retirement. I'm born and raised in Delaware County, graduated from Delta High School, did my undergrad at Ball State, and then a law degree from the University of Dayton, Ohio. While in Ball State, though, I started my legal career in emergency services with law enforcement. I was a 911 dispatcher for 5 years, and that's where I started seeing other sides of the legal field than what I was just exposed to as a child. Once I graduated law school, I came back to Delaware County, and I started practicing law with my father and my brother. My primary focus was criminal law and family law at that time, adding in a little bit of collection law. As my practice continued, I added in probate, guardianships, and civil litigation too. I have 12 years of legal experience in criminal law. I have 18 years working both sides of civil law cases, family law, guardianships, probate, and I have 7 years of judicial experience on a criminal bench. I was appointed to the bench in 2015 by then Governor Mike Pence, and I'm a Democrat, and that's because judges should not be political. It shouldn't be red or blue. It's about the black robe, and it's about due process and following the law and being impartial, making decisions based on the evidence that you hear from both sides, not coming to the bench with any preconceived notion. Prior to becoming city court judge, I have sat on the bench, the circuit benches, as a judge pro tem, and I have handled felony dockets in the past. So I've done the job that I'm now seeking. And I appreciate everybody coming out. When you vote for candidates, you don't know who you're going to get unless that candidate gives you the time to talk to them and to meet them. And that is the transparency that the voters require and deserve. And so I appreciate all the candidates being here tonight and all the voters who have come to educate themselves so we can make sure that Delaware County is properly represented.
All right, thank you. I have a question to start us out, and then we'll move to audience questions. And so my first question is about budgeting. Anyone who's ever done budgeting knows there's never enough funding for everything you might want to do. There's a lot more good ideas than there are dollars, right? So for the office you're seeking, what is the biggest funding-related challenge, and what plans do you have to address it? And Mr. Skinner goes first on this question.
Sure. So in law enforcement, not just locally, but statewide and throughout the country for the most part, the biggest budgeting challenge that I hear from other chiefs and sheriffs is competitive pay. And that's most certainly the issue that we face here and we have faced for years. The second part of that question is what am I doing to combat that or to address it? Last year we started a pretty aggressive campaign in working with the county council about getting the pay raises that we deserve for our deputies and our corrections officers. This year, we've continued with that. Actually, Delaware County is in the process of the budget process right now. The county council has been very receptive, and we have a great working relationship, and I'm very optimistic that something good is going to happen for us this year. So pay is always the biggest thing.
Mr. Green.
The thing that we're working with right now is also competitive pay, surprisingly enough. When you look around all the counties, when you work with the county council, they also, just like what the moderator said, they have that bottom line. And they try to compare us to other counties when you look at the caseload. Currently, right now, Delaware County, there are 3 full-time and 2 part-time deputies, and we are on track to have 614 cases that we touch every single year. Right now, if you look at Fort Wayne, Allen County, They're on track to do 530, and yet we are currently about 75% less paid. So I always reach out to Indiana State Department of Health and get grants, and we try to always make sure to supplement everything to make sure that all of our dollars go the furthest they can.
Thank you. Mr. Davis.
I'm gonna just piggyback off of that and add in there that I think the coroner's office is probably one of the most underfunded offices within the county. And they have an important job in our community and making sure that our loved ones are being taken care of, and when that time comes, we meet the needs of our community. I think we see a huge increase because of the drug-related overdoses, for one thing, in our community. So one thing that I think we need to do is to continue to work on grants, increase funding, and then making sure that we're working with our providers out in the community, our law enforcement officers, our EMS agencies, to make sure that we're getting the things that they need to assist our office, and continuing to make sure that we have fair pay for all the investigators that could get called at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. They take the time away from their family members to come provide that public service, and so therefore I think they should get fair and equal pay for their positions.
I think we're actually blessed to have some of the office holders we have, because they have all learned and are trying to work within the budget that our county council has to move our offices forward. Thankfully, we're not talking about tax increases. We're talking about making our budgets work and helping compensate our people in the way that they need to be compensated. We have had to work over the last few years with buying new election equipment to update from the old poll pads and the old business cards that everybody's election record were kept on, and we have been able to do that with the budget that we do now have. So it is work. We do have to go over every line, but we are able to do it within the parameters that we're given, and I'm thankful that we got those to work with.
The clerk's office employees are pretty much the lowest paid employees in our county government. And through obviously no fault of Mr. Spangler, we are working with council to get increase in pay. Having worked for the courts for so many years, I know how hard those employees work, and I know that the courts can't run without those employees. They work very hard. I've worked within our budget for the Public Defender's Office for the last 5 years, and it's a job. It's not for any public official. There are always things you need, and you ask council, and you either, are blessed to get an appropriation or transfers to be able to cover your costs. But I feel like all of the elected officials work hard to stay within our budgets and try to keep your taxes from going up.
Well, if money was no object, we would have mental health services and substance abuse services here in Delaware County that was readily available. My experience in Muncie City Court has shown me that probably 60%, if not more, of the involvement in the criminal justice, in the criminal side of the law, has something to do with mental health and substance abuse. The other thing that where I think money could be spent or is needed is access to the courts. They say justice delayed is justice denied. So we want timely resolution of disputes. And to do that, you have to have additional courts. We at one point had a Delaware County Circuit 6 approved by the legislature, but that was then turned around because of lack of funding. So if money's no object, we would have equal access to the courts. We'd have readily available access to the courts and mental health and substance abuse treatment, where we can help rehabilitate everybody, whether it's on the civil side or criminal side, to being productive members of our society.
Mr. Williams.
I took this job knowing that law enforcement doesn't pay good money. Anybody in law enforcement or be a public servant, you're not going to make huge income in this. So I think it takes a calibration of all elected officials to work together on this and make this happen. Obviously, we all want better pay, but we all take this oath to help people in the community. If it was all about pay, I don't think that anybody would be doing this. So my job, if I'm elected next sheriff, is to work with all elected officials, and as you guys know, sometimes you guys can't, not you guys, but sometimes our elected officials can't get along. So who suffers on that is the actual employees. So I don't know the answer to getting all the elected officials to get along, but I do know this, as a public servant, and I didn't sign up for this for the money. I do enjoy my job, I enjoy being a cop, I enjoy helping this community. If time's up.
All right, thank you. Next question. They've targeted the sheriff, but actually I think several of you will probably want to weigh in on this, so I'll go ahead and do it. So are you pro or con cannabis legalization? And Mr. Green, you can go first.
Don't start the timer yet. That's a very good question. I think that it is to everyone's personal opinion of what they want to do. I would have to really say, from the position that I am running for right now, I really couldn't answer that, because pro or con, it really wouldn't have anything to do with my position that I'm running for. So that would be my answer.
Mr. Davis.
Good luck.
I think I'm going to piggyback and say ditto. I don't think that question is really relevant to the office of coroner. So
I have to say, I'm kind of from the old stage, so I am not ready for the legalization of marijuana for recreational use.
I am really not in favor of marijuana for recreational use, but if it's going to be legalized, I think we should tax the heck out of it, and so that all the citizens of Indiana could benefit from the tax.
Due to the fact that I'm running for a judicial office, this is a policy question that I am unable ethically to answer. I will enforce and follow the laws that the legislature of the state of Indiana enacts.
Not a surprise. Mr. Williams.
I don't make the laws, I enforce them. So it's not legal to have it, so that's my answer.
I agree. That question may be better suited if there's a second panel tonight and there's people on that panel who are trying to be legislators at the state level. I will tell you, me personally, if I was a state representative or a state senator, I would never vote to legalize marijuana.
Thank you. It may well come up in the second panel. You never know. Okay, this is a question for everyone. Audience member asks, what distinguishes you from your opponent that makes you best suited for the office? And Mr. Davis, you go first.
thanks. I think that's a fantastic question. As I had mentioned, I've spent roughly 10 years working in public safety within our community. I also hold a bachelor's degree from Trine University in psychology. And there's a lot of psychology involved in dealing with death, dealing with family members, and dealing with investigation. I've also spent the past 6 months working at our jail as a correctional officer, while also attending nursing school. So I have quite a versatile background. In the state of Indiana, I'm licensed as a paramedic. I also am certified as a firefighter. And now, like I said, I've spent the last 6 months working in our jail system as a correctional officer. And so I've also had the opportunity to work with the coroner's office over the last 10 years, primarily providing medical care, but also dealing with death investigation and working really closely with all of the coroners. So I think that is some of my background and experience.
Thank you.
Having spent most of my adult life watching Delaware County government, I became intrigued and wanted to get involved and try to see things change. And we've all seen things change in the last few years. I have engulfed myself in election law and election integrity. And I feel that with the experience I've gained in the last few years with running your elections, and especially the 2020 presidential election, without a question, I'm best suited to go ahead and lead this for the next 4 years.
My background in the legal field and my work through the courts and the public defender's office, I think, give me a special perspective in how important the clerk's office is. And I look forward to learning more about the elections and in running the elections and keeping them smooth as we can. I know there are a lot of questions about the future of how our elections are going to be in this county, and we're looking forward to going forward with the new or hybrid system of what we currently have. But I just think my experience with the legal field and with working with judges is a great asset to me, that I can help that office work with the courts and make sure the integrity of the court documents and everything else that goes through the clerk's office is maintained.
Thank you.
I think the main thing that sets me apart is the diversity of my background. I am currently a judge, and I've been making judicial decisions for the last 7 years, and I will tell you that that role is completely different than that of advocacy. But not only have I been a judge for 7 years, I started in emergency services with law enforcement. I dispatched and rode around with law enforcement officers for 5 years, so I've been on the scene when they've been on calls. So when I hear these cases, I know what it's like, and I've seen it from the law enforcement perspective. I was criminal defense attorney for 12 years, so I sat on the side of a bench, the side of a desk with people and understood how they got where they were. That didn't mean they didn't need punished, but the humanity of it is there. 18 years of civil practice on both sides of divorces, guardianships, probate, collection cases. So every type of case that's filed in Circuit Court 1, I have worked intricately with and have been on typically both sides of that case. So I think the diversity of my background is what sets me apart and makes me more qualified for Circuit Court 1.
Thank you. Mr. Williams.
I think I'm the only candidate that actually was born and raised here. I'm a lifetime citizen here. I've watched this community with its ups and downs. I actually worked in this school for 18 years as a resource officer, working 2 jobs, working midnight shift, then I would come in here and work at Wilson Middle School, then I came here to Central High School. If elected next sheriff, I think that sets me aside because I'm going to be a working sheriff. Now, I could say that easily because I have not been in that position, but I plan on being with my troops every day, if possible. I started from the bottom. I started from the jail to where I want to work myself up to the top. I don't care what party you're with. I don't care whether you're a Democrat or Republican. My job as elected official is to work with everyone. It doesn't matter to me. I want this community to be better, and as elected official, I don't care what party you're with. So my job is to be, as a sheriff, is to be a leader and not worry about what party you're with and keep politics out of it.
Mr. Skinner.
Thank you. 2 things come to mind with this question. The first one is education. I have 2 college degrees. Also, when every police officer in Indiana has to go through the Indiana Law Enforcement Academy. It's standard, now it's 16 weeks of training. When I went through the police academy, I graduated with honors there. Only about 10% of Law Enforcement Academy graduates graduate with honors. So I hold that certificate in the highest esteem. The second one is actually experience. You can have 2 people that work the same job for 20 years, and one of them can be a much better candidate than the other one because of their experience. In my nearly 4 years of sheriff, I've ran the jail, I've ran our entire merit side, budgeting a multi-million-dollar budget.
Time, please. Mr. Green.
Like I said, I've been a reserve police officer for more than 10 years with the Muncie Police Department. I am also born and raised, and I went to Muncie Central High School. I said I don't think I've been here in about 20 years, so to be on this stage, it's interesting. I'm certified as a metallurgical death investigator through the Indiana State Coroners Association. I continue that education with 16 hours every year, and working alongside Rick Howell for the past 3.5 years has gained a ton of knowledge that I've been able to, hopefully in the future, move ahead with that. He's taught me a lot of great things, and I think that I can continue the momentum that he's built along with me, with grant opportunities, as well as budgeting, as well as community outreach to help along with the mental health aspect of it, to make sure that there's also follow-up for all of the cases that we ever have, to make sure that no one's ever left behind.
Thank you. Okay. The next question is directed to the county clerk candidates. What is your position, but anybody else can weigh in when it comes your time too. What is your position on establishing vote centers in Muncie and Delaware County? Mr. Spangler.
Great question. We just did that today. We had an election board meeting today. We have given the vote center plan to both party chairmen, and they are currently reviewing it, reviewing the sites, and they will be bringing any changes that they recommend back to the election board. Hopefully, we're going to have another meeting on the 30th of this month. Hopefully, though, before the end of the year, we will be able to have a vote on bringing vote centers to Delaware County. This has been my passion from the time I've started. I have two great office officials, the ones that went through the SEATS program, that know more about vote centers than anybody in Indiana, I think. And they are helping us bring this and answer all the questions, and I hope to have this done very soon. Thank you.
I've attended the election board meetings regarding vote centers, and I've learned a lot. The 43 precincts, voting sites that we have now, that's a lot of people to maintain. The plan as proposed, I went through the plan, and I support the party's chairman for wanting to check out every location, and we would go to about 25 voting sites. So they want to make sure that they're as evenly and fairly dispersed as possible. So I believe that the voting centers can be a good thing if they're done properly and with everybody's right to vote and able to vote being at the highest priority.
Thank you. Ms. Dunnick?
It's really not an issue that my position would ever come across, but as a person, I would support anything that we can do to make elections more accessible and the elections free and fair and transparent.
Mr. Williams?
Pretty much piggyback off what the judge said is, you know, anything that makes the election easier, makes the easier for the people to elect, and pretty much not in my category as running for the sheriff, so I really don't have much to comment on that.
Yeah, this doesn't fall under the purview of the sheriff, but I fully support voting centers. And I guess I have a follow-up question. If passed, when will they take effect?
Okay if I answer that?
Okay. Let's not make a habit of this, but
Is this cheating? As proposed, we will do it with the municipal election in 2023.
Mr. Green?
Again, it doesn't fall under the purview of the coroner's office, but I am in favor of them. If anyone has ever run for any type of political office, it's a mad rush to try to make sure that every single location is covered, to make sure that you're reaching all your constituents, and to try to put out all of the different advertising and signs. And I've also seen a lot of people frustrated when they leave because they're at the wrong polling center, or that they're in one district and not the other and it's been switched. Really trying to consolidate all that and trying to make sure it's streamlined, that what Mr. Spangler is doing right now is a fantastic idea.
Thank you.
I think accessibility is going to be the most important thing when considering vote centers, making sure that they're accessible to voters, making sure that they are educated and understanding that that precinct that someone may have went to for 40 or 50 years may no longer be their polling location. So that would just be my biggest concern with it, is just making sure that voters are updated and aware if that is the decision that they decide to go with and bringing vote centers to our communities. But it could be beneficial for sure for people who are traveling different places and, you know, maybe closer if you're at work to go down the street and vote at that vote center than to have to go back to your home precinct to vote. So lots of things to consider.
All right, thank you. The audience member submitted this one also for the clerk candidates, but I'm going to expand it a little bit so it applies to everybody. So the audience member asks, do you believe the clerk's office has the responsibility to educate the public on election laws? And if so, how do you propose to do so? And I would ask the rest of you, how do you see your role as educating the public about what your office does? But Ms. Harvey, you go first.
The duty to educate the public about election laws are, in my view, important in the regard that make sure they know their right to vote, and getting everybody who is unable to, you know, go to a polling site or a vote center to make sure that they know that they can vote absentee. There are so many intricate laws regarding the elections that I don't think you could possibly educate the public on every law. But I do think that it is important to get everybody educated as to what their rights are and how to exercise those rights.
Thank you. Dunick.
My concern about the clerk's office educating the public on election laws, that you may have people who are non-lawyers interpreting law and they could be giving the wrong advice. That would be the only hesitancy that I would have. I would, in my role as a judicial officer, support any organizations, or even if the clerk's office did, to do a symposium, a forum, an educational day. I would participate in that, because the more the public knows about the election laws, the better the community can be, because they'll be able to, people who have a question whether or not they can vote or can't vote, or vote over here or vote over there, there needs to be a way to address those and to answer those questions. Whether it's the clerk's office employee at the counter, I'm not sure I would want to put that level of responsibility on the lowest paid member of county government.
Thank you. Mr. Williams.
Obviously, I would never want to inform anybody of a wrong election law. I'm not in the clerk's office, and just like at work, if I'm unfamiliar with a law, I'll ask somebody and find the answer. So if it's able to have more information at the sheriff's office, absolutely. I would refer it back to the clerk's office. But this is something that I think that if there's more information at the sheriff's office or other polling sites or public places, then absolutely. If not, I refer back to the clerk's office.
So this topic, actually, I've already done this about the sheriff's office. Before the primary election in May, I made a campaign video and posted it on Facebook about the duties of the sheriff. I think it's important for people to understand what it is that we do. There are certain state statutes. There are state statutes that mandate things that the sheriff must do. There are things that, like for example, operate a sex offender registry, serve civil papers, pursue and jail all felons, to operate a county jail. That's the sheriff's job, and numerous other things. One thing for you to keep in mind, the sheriff's race is very important for you as a voter, because the sheriff is the only law enforcement official in the state of Indiana that you as a citizen have impact on deciding who it is. All town marshals, all chiefs, superintendent of state police, those are all appointed positions. You get to elect your sheriff.
Mr. Green, what about the coroner's office?
The one thing that I would love to educate with everyone is the coroner's office and what their duty is. It's an administrative role to investigate any death and to do cause and manner for which someone passed away. And that is just the everyday of what we would do. But I would really like to educate and have more public hearings, and also just have outreach days for mental health as well as planning. It's amazing how many times it will go out at 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning, as I did this morning, and you have to tell a loved one that someone had passed away unexpectedly. They don't know what to do. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, who do you call? How can we help? What can we do for you? And I think that that is a huge thing in 2022, 2023, is mental health and outreach and really trying to help everyone. So I think that's one big thing that I'm going to try to enact in 2023.
Just to piggyback off of that, one of the things I did want to mention, the medical legal death investigator training that's been mentioned previously, that is only available for people who are elected as the coroner or who are appointed as deputy coroners. And that is something I fully intend to pursue that training. One of the things I wanted to mention, I'm glad this got brought up, is policy and procedure, making sure that all the departments across the county understand how to handle and work a death investigation, especially when we get new EMTs, new firefighters, new police officers that come onto the force. They may not understand what to do when they get put in that position. And as a first responder, they're the first one there, and they need to know what they need to do if they come across that situation. And just making sure that we have that training, I believe, is really important for our office. And again, educating people on what the position does is an important role. I don't think many people know what a coroner actually does.
Mr. Spangler.
Well, we are not attorneys in the clerk's office, so we do have to be careful. But what our duty is to be a resource center. With the help of the Indiana Election Division, we have a library of resource materials that we can guide you to or help you to read any law or any question that you have. Since I've been the clerk here, I've talked to many people on both sides of the aisle. I always tell them not to hesitate to call our office. If we can't answer your question, we'll guide you to where you can get that information. And so instead of telling you a law, we have to help you find it, read it, and get your answer there.
All right. One last question before we go to closing statements. This is directed at our judge candidate, but I think you all interact with the court system in some sense. So here we go. In your opinion, is the current court system overloaded? Do we need an additional circuit court?
My answer to that is yes. Currently, Muncie City Court, for example, is a court not of record, meaning that it doesn't have a straight line to the Supreme Court, to the appellate courts. So we filed in that court domestic battery cases, DUIs, battery with injury, what used to be handgun cases, and if I find guilty at the end of that trial and the defendant doesn't like it, they get a request a trial de novo, meaning it goes over to the circuit courts and it starts completely over. So if it takes 1.5 years to get a domestic battery case to trial in Muncie City Court, they get it started all over again, and it's going to take another 2 years, and that victim probably won't come back and testify again. So there's a move. Misdemeanors are filed in city court because the circuit courts are too overloaded. It takes 2 years to get a divorce finalized. So yes, the number of cases pre-COVID, the number of cases post-COVID are coming back up. Delaware County deserves a circuit court 6.
Thank you. Mr. Williams.
Well, speaking from personal experience, I agree. Yes, we do need another circuit court. As a police officer, there's times where I may testify in court on a case and it may be 2 years down the road, 3 years down the road. Now, don't know if that keeps getting suspended or the attorney works something out with the prosecutor. I don't know, but I know that we have to man that as the sheriff, and that might be an issue too with the manpower we have now. So I obviously think we do need another circuit court because of issues like, you know, a police officer have to testify 3 years down the road. It's hard to remember that when sometimes you can't even remember last week with the older you get. So as far as like the criminal cases, that would be something more for the judges and somebody that works in the courts. I've not had that privilege yet.
I think the courts are backlogged. I know that when COVID came around, the courts basically stopped operating for a while. All of the arrests were still being made, all of the cases were still being pushed to the prosecutor's office, but they weren't going to the courts. To Dave's point, I had a subpoena the other day for a case that I did back when I was a sergeant on midnight shift from July of 2018. So yeah, I think the courts are backlogged. Part of the problem is people that operate within the criminal justice system. And I'll use the public defenders, for example. We need more public defenders. We have trouble keeping those people in Delaware County, back to the very first point we made today, because of the pay. But, you know, the police, the public defenders, the judges, the attorneys, we're all just cogs in a wheel. But to answer the question, yeah, they're backlogged quite a bit.
Thank you.
I would too also say that they're backlogged. Being with the coroner's office, we will be asked to testify. We will get subpoenas. And to the sheriff's point, when you get a subpoena from 2.5 years ago, you have to pull your records, you have to pull evidence, making sure that the other departments, do you have all those records, and pulling your notebook out and seeing what exactly happened. To speed up that process, I think would be a benefit for everyone, from the prosecutor's side to the defendant's side, to make sure that all the evidence is kept in a secure area, and making sure that we're just not backlogging everything and all that evidence just keeps piling up and piling up.
Thank you.
Yeah, the court systems definitely are overloaded. And speaking from personal experience, having to have testified before in my role as a paramedic, it definitely gets difficult if we go back and wait 2+ years before we're getting the chance to testify in court. So I'm definitely in favor of expanding our courts and making sure that we're able to work through that process and get justice done fairly and quickly as possible.
I am not now, or have I ever been, a fan of Circuit Court 6. I know we're busy right now, crazy busy. We're behind. A lot of that's due to COVID. I think we can work through this situation. As Tony addressed, we need other officials, public defenders, we need prosecutors. We need to work the system, get it back on track, and we'll be able to do fine. The cost of a Circuit Court 6 can't be substantiated by a current county budget. So if we do decide, or if the voters decide to go in that direction, I guess you might as well get ready for a tax increase.
Thank you. Ms. Harvey.
I am in favor of a Circuit Court 6. As a court employee, I was sitting right there with a calendar trying to manage the judge's calendar, and having 2 attorneys on the phone call you just wanting to set a final hearing for a divorce, and they need, maybe it's complicated, maybe they need a half day, and you're giving them dates 9 months away. Same with criminal cases. Now that I work in the public defender's office, we get calls from defendants. We get calls because we've had a large turnover in public defenders. Some people have had multiple public defenders, and things kind of grind to a halt, when you get a new attorney, because they have to acclimate themselves to their case. So I realize the financial implications of a Circuit Court 6, but we've got to get these cases through the court system.
Thank you. Okay, to wrap up this panel, each candidate may make a 2-minute closing statement. And Mr. Williams, it's your turn to go first.
Well, I'll finish off with this. I know I've preached about being the only candidate from born and raised here in Muncie. But if you're elected official, you're to run this like a business, not like a favoritism or put politics in it. I'm not going to put people in positions just because I owe them a favor. I'm going to put people in positions and leadership roles that they deserve, and I know they can lead the department like it needs to be ran. The only way to do that is to make sure that there's not politics in it. You don't do where you take the good old boy system and you put in people in leadership roles just because you owe them something or they're your friend. Have a panel, do an interview, and see who's best for that job. I think right now the morale is absolutely low, and that's national-wide. That has nothing to do right now with local, but it's nationally with anybody wanting to be in law enforcement right now. My job is to bring that morale up. If I'm out there daily showing that my sheriff deputies that I care and I'm a working sheriff and that I make twice as much as they do, but I'm out there working with them and sometimes, or probably even 3 times as much as them, but I'm out there daily working with them and show them I care, because that affects you as the citizens of Delaware County. It affects the safety of Delaware County. So when you know that you have a morale issue, but nothing's being done about, I find that a big issue. I think that's a big problem. So my job, if I'm elected your next sheriff, I want to fix those problems right away. At one point, what do you look at and say, is it really pay, or is there some other issues going on here? So, yes, we are underpaid, but why are we having so much of a turnover rate? When do you look at yourself and go, maybe there's an issue here other than pay? My job as elected to the next Delaware County Sheriff, I want to fix that problem and bring the morale up. Like I said before, public servants are paid. Time up.
Thank you. Mr. Skinner.
Yeah, thank you. I do want to thank you, Dr. Taylor, and all the organizations that put this on. I greatly appreciate it. As far as the comment about good old boys and politics and favoritism and that, I can assure you that doesn't happen on my department with promotions and hires. As a matter of fact, when I got elected sheriff, you would be shocked to know how many people that I hired and how many people that I promoted that actively campaigned against me just months before when I was running for election. So I hope that wasn't a crack at me. There's a saying that says the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior, and I truly believe that. What you've done for the past 10 years is a pretty good indicator of what you're going to do in the future. Some of the things that I've got accomplished in my first term as your sheriff is reuniting the drug task force, implementing the IRACS program in the jail, a state-of-the-art, first of its kind rehabilitation, and there's only 5 jails in the state that are operating the IRACS program. We're currently overhauling our SOPs. We have body cams now assigned to every deputy on the road and our investigators. We've increased training by 30%. We've generated nearly $1.2 million for the county budget from housing out-of-county inmates. I've stood up for the safety of the citizens in Yorktown when they had a tyrannical marshal come in and pull his people from our SWAT team, and then got caught in a lie saying that the state police promised a SWAT response in 30 minutes or less. And most recently, I led the charge with a group of people against the Department of Transportation to stop the closing of the Riggin Road crossover on the Muncie bypass. This is a short list of my accomplishments, but this is the leadership that you can expect from me in the next 4 years.
Mr. Green.
Again, thank you, Dr. Taylor. Thank you, everyone that participated in the audience as well, too. Again, I want to continue the positive momentum that we have currently with the Delaware County Coroner's Office. When I came in 3.5 years ago with Rick, I helped overhaul the reporting system. We now use a system called Coroner's Case Management System. Before, it used to be manila folders and you hand wrote all of the reports. They are now starting to be all digitized. We're working with the state of Indiana to help digitize all past records. We keep all records forever. So we have one little office that has rows and rows and rows of those filing cabinets that we're trying to digitize. The other thing that I want to do is, again, work with all the departments and bring up those memorandum of understandings. How are we going to work together? When should you call the coroner? What do they do? How can they help us? I think that reaching out and educating everyone, and also making sure what can we do for you, because it's kind of interesting. When I started doing politics with this, this isn't a department that changes policies. I can't bring in any jobs. I can't lower your taxes. How do you even campaign for that? Is, hi, please vote for me, and I hope you never have to see me ever again, because it's not going to be a good day. And I really actually like talking to people, because that look on their face And then you get to educate them and say, this is what I do. This is how I get to interact with you. And let me interact with you now so that when we do have to experience the 5:30 in the morning phone call that you have to call a dear friend that a family member's been taken away, it helps that. So I think that with the mental health and working with the other agencies out there and doing some collaboration along with the investigation and cooperation, that will help. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Davis.
Again, I just want to say thank you to everybody that came out tonight, all the different organizations that put this forum on to allow you guys to have a chance to hear from the candidates. Again, my name is Ryan Davis. I'm running for coroner. I've spent the last 10 years working in our county in public safety, and I believe in public service. That's why I'm running for this position. I am running because I believe I can provide a service to our community. I believe my background, working in emergency services, my training with my bachelor's degree in psychology has prepared me to be able to sit down and talk with family members on that worst day. I'm running because I would like to see our response time improved, making sure that coroners are readily available, that they're getting to the scenes as quickly as possible to work with the agencies. I would like to, again, make sure that training is done universally, that all of the departments across the county understand what their role is, if and when they should have to interact with the coroner's office. And those are, several of the big reasons why I'm running. Again, it's just because I believe I can bring service to our community. So I just want to thank everybody for coming out tonight, and I hope you will consider voting for me as your next coroner.
Thank you.
I want to thank you all for allowing me to speak to you tonight. I love my job. I really was supposed to be retired by now. I don't know whether that's smart or not, but I have the greatest staff in Delaware County government. And together with these people who work side by side with me every day, we have restructured the entire voter registration office and given you a true bipartisan office. We implemented electronic poll pads so that we could do away with the old poll books that were, we couldn't even read them half the time. The old poll cards that kept your voting record. It's now all well kept and will be. In 2020, I was lucky enough to receive the award of Indiana Clerk of the Year. Right now, we're working diligently to bring vote centers and vote center voting to Delaware County. Hopefully, we will be able to, conclude that by the end of the year. And I want to end with something that actually a friend of mine wrote. It says, "The sanctity of our freedom and the strength of our government relies on the integrity of our elections." Think about that. That's the way we need to do it.
Thank you.
I, too, would like to thank everyone for coming tonight to learn more about the candidates that you're going to be voting for, and for our hosts and the steering committee for having us here. I know that how important the election process is. I respect it. I will continue to keep the level of integrity at the utmost importance. I also know how important the office of clerk is to the public and to the court system. And you are there partially to serve at the pleasure of the judges, to help make sure that the documents run through in a timely manner and that the cases are opened in a timely manner when they're filed electronically. One of my concerns is that when we moved out to Wilson Middle School, the clerk's office is not open during the lunch hour, and people who are going to pay support or open up a case, pay on a judgment, a lot of people who work 9 to 5, that's their only time that they are off work to be able to go take care of these tasks. And with the clerk's office closed during the lunch hour, I think that prohibits some access to what is important to the public. So I would want the clerk's office to be reopened through the lunch hour. I think that I would be a well-rounded clerk with my legal background and my administrative background, and I just look forward to serving the public and the county offices as your county clerk. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dunnick.
I also would like to thank the organizations that put this forum on, because this is, I think, so far the only way that we've had as candidates to meet the voters or to speak to the voters en masse. I also agree that the past is the best indicator of the future. So I want to talk about what I've done as city court judge. When I was appointed July of 2015, there was over 8,800 criminal cases pending. In the last 7 years, that is now down to just over 3,400 actively pending. I was able to had to rework the court structure to ensure due process and to actually put due process safeguards in place. Defendants were not being given copies of the charging information. They had no idea what criminal charges were pressed against them. I worked with the state and the Indiana Court Office of Court Services to bring Muncie City Court into the electronic age. We now process files electronically. We accept only e-tickets, and we do electronic distribution of the court notices. The state offices do not typically work with the city and town courts, but due to my reaching out to them and working with them, I was able to get them to come in, and they helped do the transfer of the cases from the old system to the new system. Judge races are important. Hopefully none of us will ever be a victim or a defendant in a felony case, which would be the ones that are heard in Circuit Court 1, but it's highly probable that we will all be touched by the civil law. We'll have someone who passes away, then we'll have to do probate. We'll have a loved one that cannot, that loses their faculties. Those areas of law, criminal and civil, are what I have experience in, and I have 18 years of experience in it, and I have the experience on both sides of those cases. That's what I'm bringing to Circuit Court 1, and I'd like to ask for your vote. And that you vote for experience, you vote for qualifications, and you don't vote for party.
Thank you very much. And thank you all for participating this evening. Let's have a big round of applause for the candidates. Okay, there'll be a real short break while we prepare the stage for the next panel, so don't go away. The panel was originally scheduled for September 29th, and we discovered there's a conflict with the forum in Randolph County that also is included in the district of some of these races, and so we wanted people in both counties to have an opportunity to hear all the candidates that could show up. And so the candidates who had confirmed for the 29th graciously agreed to reschedule for tonight. We extend another invitation to all the other candidates, and so thank you for your flexibility. After I introduce these candidates, again, each one will make a 2-minute opening statement. After their opening statements, we'll ask as many questions as time allows. They'll have 1 minute for answer. We'll rotate. Timekeeper will give you a signal at 30 seconds and when time's up, so keep an eye on them, please. And again, we ask the audience to keep your questions relevant to these legislative offices and short and to the point. After the questions, each candidate will have 2 minutes for a closing statement. And again, we ask that you hold your reactions during the forum and hold your applause, except for now, after we greet the candidates. So Melanie Wright is the Democratic candidate for State Senate District 26. Scott Alexander is the Republican candidate for State Senate District 26. He is unable to be with us tonight. John Bartlett is the Democratic candidate for State House District 33. J.D. Prescott is the Republican candidate and incumbent representative for State House District 33. Our efforts to contact Mr. Prescott were unsuccessful. Sue Arrington is the Democratic candidate and incumbent representative for State House District 34. Dale Basham is the Republican candidate for State House District 34. He is unable to be with us tonight. Brad Sawinski is the Democratic candidate for State House District 35. Elizabeth Roray is the Republican candidate and incumbent for State House District 35. Our efforts to contact Ms. Roray were unsuccessful. Janine Lee Lake is the Democratic candidate for Congress District 5. Our efforts to contact Ms. Lake were unsuccessful. And Victoria Sparts is a Republican candidate and incumbent member of Congress for District 5. She is unable to be with us tonight, so thank you all for being here. Now each candidate may make a 2-minute opening statement, and Ms. Wright, you may go first.
Thank you, everybody. My name is Melanie Wright, and I am a teacher at Daleville Community Schools. I received my bachelor's degree in music education from Ball State University, and then went on to pursue a master's degree in curriculum instruction from Anderson University. Loved it so much that I stayed on and obtained an administrative license. And then instead of going into administration, I went into politics. And I have had the opportunity of teaching in 5 different school districts in 4 different states. So I've had an opportunity to see different parts of the country. I have been back here at Daleville for 21 years. I'm currently at the elementary school teaching K-6 music. I also served as the state representative for District 35 from 2014 to 2020, which I thoroughly enjoyed, being a servant leader and going around to the entire district and making great connections and relationships, and then taking that voice down to the State House. While at the State House, I also had the opportunity of serving on the Ways and Means Committee and working on the state budget. I was also ranking minority member for the Agriculture Committee and did a lot of work with agriculture in this very conservative area. And I am just so happy to be running for the Senate seat. This is actually an open Senate seat because of the redistricting. So it encompasses all of Delaware County and all of Randolph counties. So I have been out there talking to voters, getting to know people through events, and just really just trying to listen to their voices to make sure that I am able to take that down to the State House as part of the Senate. I just feel like I would be a great person to lead that charge, because I think it's important to be out and involved and be present and to interact with people, and because everybody has an issue that they're looking for, and they're looking to have a voice and somebody to listen to them for that. And so I'm so excited to be here. So thank you for everybody who put this together. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Mr. Bartlett.
My name's John Bartlett. I live up in Blackford County with my wife. We have 4 grown children. We live on the farm that my grandparents purchased 70 years ago this year. I actually grew up in Randolph County in that northwestern corner. I grew up with I graduated from Monroe Central. I had a Ridgeville address, a red key phone, and I lived 1.5 miles from Albany. So the district I'm running in, District 33, is kind of a large territorial district. It encompasses all of Blackford County, the southern 2/3 of Jay County, all of Randolph County, the eastern 1/3 of Delaware County, and 1 township in Henry County. So when Blackford County was put into this district, because of where I grew up, I feel like I'm running in home. So I know these areas really well. I've lived all my life in these areas. So I feel very confident that I know the people. I've been going to council, town council, city council, county council, county commissioners meetings. I've been meeting lots of people, talking to everybody, listening to them. Driving through my old home, I'm very saddened to see some of the things that, some of the decay that's happened in our communities. I graduated from IU with a double major in political science and history. I've worked for 28 years in IT for a major company in Indianapolis, and I handle remote IT support for 25 sales offices coast to coast. So I have a lot of experience in those sorts of things. And I grew up on a farm. We were small family farmers. We raised cattle, we raised crops, baled lots of hay. So I feel that I know a lot about the people that live in the district.
Ms. Arrington.
Ready?
Yeah, go.
Oh, okay.
Carry on.
Well, thank you for being here, and thank you to the hosts for making this forum possible. I am Sue Arrington, and I grew up in northern Indiana and came to Muncie in 1970 with my husband, Paul. He came to teach physics, and I taught Spanish for 3 years here. Our daughters, Sarah and Amy, were born and raised here, and they graduated from Muncie Community Schools. During this time, I got involved with the women's movement and then later went on staff for Planned Parenthood for 17 years. It was during this time that I connected the dots between public policy and people's lives, the things that I was interested in. In fact, public policy affects almost everything in our lives. So that's when I got involved with politics, first as a volunteer for other candidates, and then I ran for election myself. I first was elected to the Delaware County Council, and then to the Indiana Senate, and now I've been in the Indiana House for 10 years. And I'm running again because I want to see Indiana value our teachers and offer our kids a world-class education that prepares them for well-paying jobs right here in Indiana. I want our state to be a place where all Hoosiers have health care that's affordable and accessible. And I want to see our state be a place where we work collectively to fight climate change and to improve our environment. And with this special session that just ended, that gave me another reason to run. And that is to restore women's rights to make the private medical decision about abortion for themselves. So those are the reasons I'm running again.
Thank you. Mr. Swinski.
Thank you for having us. My name is Brad Swinski. I'm running for the State House in District 35. I'm the Youth Services Manager at the Alexandria Monroe Public Library. I did go to Ball State, graduated in 2006, and moved to Alexandria in 2007. Been there ever since. It's a very small town, and I love working, 2 minutes away from where I live. The reason that I got involved is actually because of all of the book challenges that had been presented throughout the state. I'm very against any kind of censorship of intellectual freedom. I spoke at the State House against this, and the Representative Roray, my opponent, actually voted in favor of HB 1040, SB 17, and I was really wanting to run to make her aware that there were citizens that disagreed with it. When you make a vote against what the superintendent's union is wanting to do, what the Indiana State Teachers Association is wanting to do, I'm not sure where you would be getting your information then. And when citizens are coming out and saying, do not vote this way, and we receive no answer, I believe politicians should be held accountable to their citizens. I feel that just in this era, there's a lot of people feeling that they're not being heard. And that is one thing that I would like to see changed. I'm here to listen to the people of District 35 and act in their best interests. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I've got a question to start out before we turn to the audience questions. And so my first question is, what should the state do with its budget surplus? Mr. Bartlett, you can go first.
Well, I've thought a lot about that. While I was traveling through some of the towns, I've asked questions like, what do you need? What do you need in your town? The trustees and the council say, well, we need money. What do you need money for? Well, we need fire trucks. So I just thought, well, we've got $5 billion of state surplus. So I just did some math, and I found out that the average cost of a fire truck is $500,000. And so I took $500,000 and took $1 billion of that $5 billion, and it will buy 2,000 fire trucks. We don't need 2,000 fire trucks, but I think that money we need to use to invest back in ourselves. We don't need to be giving it back to the people in a tax cut. The tax cut would only amount to about $10 a week, a little less than that per person. We need to be investing in ourselves, investing in our communities to rebuild them. And I think giving that back is just, I can't imagine why we would do that.
We've tried to have some alternatives to squirreling this money away. through amendments on the floor to invest in our people and invest in our infrastructure and our institutions. But every time our amendments come up, they get voted down. So I can see some ways that we ought to be spending this. We know that our teachers are severely underpaid. And so that's one place we could be putting some of this money. We also know that early education is extremely important to give those small children a good start in life. We do have, Paths to Quality is a good program, but it's not in very many places. We need to invest more in that early education. And we know that we need broadband in many places and infrastructure. So there are a million places we could be using that money to invest in our state.
Thank you. Mr. Swinski.
I would actually probably like to see it go to the Department of Child Services. Every time that there's an incident involving a child that was, removed from a home and then put back in the home, there's always a discussion of, caseloads for social workers, caseloads for case managers of, children that go through child abuse and things like that. And there seem to be gaps in that system that $6 billion might be able to help. And yeah, the infrastructure. If we have an extra $6 billion, I don't understand how there's potholes. So yeah, those are at least my two, so thank you.
Thanks. Ms. Wright.
Okay, I was compiling my list. So first of all, after serving on the Ways and Means Committee, there are definitely ways that we are wasting money that's already in the state budget that without even touching that surplus, we could reel some of that money back in, especially when it comes to charter schools and our voucher program. So there are a lot of ways that instead of sending that money, and there's no accountability for some of that money to a new startup school, and then the school starts up and has 20 students instead of 200, there's no way to get that money back. Okay, so that's the first way. Another way is to invest in working families, because many families are just working 2 and 3 jobs, and they're just not making enough of a living wage to be able to sustain everything that they need. And then also our service industry. So anything having to do with, teachers, social workers, nurses, especially CPAs who work in nursing homes, that they are desperately needed. And then the infrastructure needs to be put on some sort of a rotation where we are budgeted in and we allocate that every year.
Thank you. Okay, audience question about education, kind of local issue here. Will you support legislation to return the Muncie School Board to the voters? And Ms. Arrington, you go first.
All right. Well, I was one of the legislators, along with Melanie, who voted no in turning it over to Ball State. I think partly it was because of the way it was done. It was done behind closed doors, and those of us who served Delaware County were not made aware of it until the very last minute. I think, too, that getting rid of the teachers union and the school board being appointed instead of elected were other reasons why I voted no. But this is what we have for now. And I think actually this, Ball State has done a pretty good job. But my vote is one. And it was the Republican supermajority that passed it. So I think the issue is we have to convince the Republicans to do it if we want to see it returned back to the voters.
Mr. Swinski.
As a citizen of Alexandria, I'm not sure I have a dog in the race, but I'd say yes, return it to the people.
Thank you. Ms. Wright.
Yes, thank you. As Representative Arrington said, we both fought hard to not have that takeover occur. So yes, I would be in favor of it being returned to the voters. And here's why. It was done a lot behind closed doors, and as much as we met and tried to counter that, we were just outnumbered by the supermajority. And so now, if any concerned citizens have any issues, they have to vote for governor because that's who appoints that board. And so it's just too far away to be manageable and accountable. Also, we just did away with a whole board of elected officials in various areas of their terms, and that's part of our democracy, and we just took that away. I think that we should have looked at the issue that caused the problem, and looked at that and focused on it instead of just trying to do this process where we do a takeover and we experiment under the guise of they can't handle it themselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bartlett.
I come from a family with many educators. My wife taught for Head Start. My mother taught for Delcom schools for 29 years. My sister's the Blackford County librarian. I come from a family of educators. I know that there have been points of contentious times with the school boards, but ultimately, everybody serving on a school board, everybody working in a school wants the best for our children. Pulling the school board away from the voters, that is not representative of what the people of the school district want. So I would very much be in favor of returning not just Muncie schools, but the I can't remember the other school system, but there's another school system that had its school board ripped away from it. And Gary, thank you. Mm-hmm. So I would be very much in favor of returning them to the voters.
Thank you. We've got some another education question here, so I'll ask this before we move on. What can the state do to face the problems of the shortage of teachers and lack of resources? And Mr. Swinski, you can go first.
I would say an increase of pay. Also, the letting them teach. There was, in the last session, there's an abundance of micromanagement of teachers with lesson plans needing to be sent in advance. The more kind of hoops that you have for teachers to jump through, the less good ones you're going to really get. You're not going to attract new teachers and new talent if you are a state that attacks teachers, which after the pandemic, I'm not sure why anybody would. We ask, as a community, so much of our teachers that right now saying that, oh, now you're not doing well enough. We're still kind of coming out of it. So I do think that there's a lenience that needs to be made too.
Thank you. That's right.
So starting around 2010, this really started to take off. So the American Legislative Exchange Council is a far-right group that has deep pockets, and it's very effective. So they train legislators just like they would teachers going to professional development. So some of the same legislation dropped verbatim in multiple states because the federal level was gridlocked. So I think, first of all, if we stop micromanaging schools, which they're incredibly micromanaged, you would be shocked because it's not like it was when we all went to school. Start problem solving instead of listening to lobbyists and special interest groups that are especially outside of the state of Indiana, and also ask and listen to educators, because if we would just ask, hey, what do you need from us? How can we help you? We could really set a model here in the state of Indiana that could work for the entire country and be a great example for the entire country. But right now there's a move to privatization, and that's more important to many state legislators right now than it is to retain teachers and to protect public education.
Thank you. Mr. Bartlett.
Building off the question there on the budget surplus, Sue said something about it. I also found out that there are 65,000 public teachers in Indiana. 65,000 public teachers. If you took $500 million of that budget surplus and divvied that $500 million among them, that's a $7,700 pay raise to each and every one of them. Let's pay them what they should be getting. That's first of all. And second of all, it's been mentioned, let's reduce or eliminate the ridiculous requirements and regulations of things that they have to do that just make no sense. Among the top of them is iLearn or iStep or whatever it's called now. we are teaching to a test. We are not teaching the problem solving that Melanie just mentioned. We're not teaching that, and what that is hindering our society in the future because they're not learning.
Well, before I came here tonight, I spent time knocking on doors in Whiteley. And one of the doors that I knocked on was a veteran teacher at Garfield. And we probably spent 15 minutes talking about what could be done better to support our schools and our kids and our teachers. And she really had two things. One, give teachers the respect they deserve as professionals. Recognize them as professionals and stop micromanaging what is you're trying to do in the classroom. Let teachers teach. And so I think that, and I've heard that before from others, but I think that is a huge part of it. That's why it's hard to get people to want to stay or begin teaching. And the other part is what's been mentioned, better pay. We can do better for our teachers than we are.
Okay, we'll move to another topic here. What should Indiana do to maintain, upgrade, or replace our aging infrastructure, and how would you fund these efforts? And Ms. Wright, you go first.
Yes, so I referenced that a little bit earlier. So in our Ways and Means budget, I think we could easily set aside money that would go towards infrastructure every year, and it seems to not be as effective as what it should be. So I look at that when I remember the guy who worked on my furnace said, hey, you're going to need a furnace in 3 years, so I made sure I saved for the furnace. We're just simply not doing that. And so all of a sudden we have this crumbling infrastructure and we're trying to go back and pave and spot check it. It's just not working. So in order to do that, I think we're going to have a long-term solution where we all come back and revisit roads and bridges and make sure that they are up to date, up to code, and that they're repaved, resurfaced so that we can maintain them. And so it's not going back to the bare minimum and having to replace them all the time. Then also in that plan, I think there should be replacement at a larger level so we have a more visionary plan for attacking our infrastructure.
Thanks.
Where we got, or how we got here with our infrastructure, with our roads and things, was back in 2006, Governor Daniels leased our toll road to a foreign company. And we used the tolls off of our toll road to maintain our roads. And all of a sudden, we stopped getting that revenue. And 12 years later, in 2018, the sky was falling because our roads are turning into gravel. And so we had to pass a gas tax. And that gas tax is getting progressively bigger. So we had a chance to bring back the toll road money, and Governor Pence signed off on it and gave it to another foreign company. We need to find ways, and part of that budget surplus could be easily used to help us rebuild the roads.
Thank you.
Yes, I agree that some of that surplus should be spent on infrastructure. I think we also need to look towards the future. What kind of vehicles are we going to have on the road? Fewer and fewer are going to be taking gas. So we've got to figure out how are we going to keep our roads up when, most people are driving a EV. I think, too, that the infrastructure bill that we did pass, which was a long-term bill, we passed that, I think, 4 years ago, maybe 5 now, which I voted for, did raise taxes to be dedicated to our roads and streets. And this last summer, Governor Holcomb came to Muncie with $1 million check for our roads here in Muncie.
Thank you. Mr. Swinski.
Like the other said, the $6 billion budget surplus should be used for a lot of the bridges and the rest of the infrastructure. The federal highway system is one of my favorite things that humans have done in history. I think it's one of the most impressive. The thing I feel that they forgot about, though, is the constant upkeep of those roads too. So if we have these, we're going to have to take care of them. I would also suggest too, with the infrastructure, setting up some sort of easier commute for people to get from Muncie to Indy or Muncie to Fort Wayne. So if there's some sort of like a light rail that can be researched and kind of looked into, that would be good for the community, I think.
Thank you. Okay, the next question will go to Mr. Bartlett first. So what is your position on the abortion legislation, SB 1, that passed this summer during the special session and just now took effect?
Abortion, I've said this before, and abortion, never been an abortion where the circumstances have not been a tragedy. It's always a very difficult decision for a woman to go through that situation. I lean back on, and I'm going to mess it up, but a Ruth Bader Ginsburg quote where she said that it's the central thing for family planning, for when to start a family, for her life, for her well-being, and for her dignity. And there are too many things. My opponent has come out against, even in the exceptions for rape, incest, health of the mother, and I can't imagine some of those things.
Well, I voted against SB 1 in the special session because I believe this is a decision that should rest with the individual and not the government, because every woman's situation is different, and yet this new law has very, very few exceptions. It's almost a total ban. And so it treats us all as one size fits all. And today is the first day that it has gone into effect. It's a tragic day because it takes away a basic freedom that women have had for almost 50 years. And it's Hoosier women who are losing that freedom, and it's given to the government. I think that we don't have things in place.
Time, please.
Thank you.
Mr. Sawinski.
As far as abortion, it's a personal choice, and it's a choice of really no concern, I think, of anybody but the person that's going through it. The impact on women's health from SB 1 as well, it is restricting, health care for women who may become pregnant. Both sides of the argument, when it was presented for SB 1, were against it. Even people pro-choice and pro-life. I feel that the legislature rushed through a very important decision that they should have taken a lot more time on, just to get it through. Nobody was happy with the bill as it was passed. They all thought that it could be different or changed, and they still did it, which is concerning to me and hopefully all the citizens.
Thank you. Ms. Wright.
So abortion is the big wedge issue that people use between Republicans and Democrats all the time. And they use it as a wedge issue to drive us away from like our pocketbooks and other things that affect our daily life. But because of Roe v. Wade, it was brought to the forefront this summer. But I think that we need to look at a broader picture. Like for instance, most of the birth control is on the shoulders of a woman. Also, our healthcare facilities are fleeing from our rural areas, and so we're having to travel more to get health care. And then what about the gray areas? So what happens if a person is pregnant and the heartbeat of the fetus stops and you're past that period? The doctors have hesitancy to perform those kinds of procedures now because of this new law. And then think about this. We are at the epicenter of some human trafficking that I have been working on for the last several years. And also as a teacher who sees trauma from people who are sexually abused by family members and friends. We must address this.
Thank you. Moving to a different topic, and Ms. Arrington, you'll go first here. Do you support Indiana suspending the gas tax on a short-term basis?
Yes, I do. In fact, the Democratic caucus in the House, and I believe the Senate as well, proposed this right at the end of the session when prices were really high. And, you know, we weren't listened to. We had hoped we might be able to bring this up in the special session, and that didn't happen. But I think people have been hurting, and that was something we could have done back then when it was at its highest point that would have helped people when they needed it.
My question is, if we have a $6 billion surplus, why would we still need the gas tax for the immediate future if it is going to be something that we would, suspend and then reinstate later on? As Sue said, the gas prices at that time were very, very high, and a lot of the public was in favor of the suspension of the gas tax.
Thank you, Ms. Wright.
Okay, so the gas tax, gas prices went up because of a plethora of different reasons from around the world that were affecting the global economy. Yes, I would have voted for a suspension of the gas tax, and a few years ago, I did not vote for the gas tax increase because I felt like it was putting, it was really hurting working families, just like this summer it was hurting working families with inflation and the gas tax. So what we could do as problem solvers at the state level would be able to offer that even if it was short term. I want to go back and reiterate this. I think we need to have a long-term vision for funding so that we don't have to increase taxes, that we could go back and we can shore up the way that we are funding the programs that are already in our state to see how we could save money and reallocate that money. And then we could also use a little bit of the surplus too to help working families, but not diminish it greatly because I feel like we still need a fund for a rainy day.
I addressed some of this in the infrastructure question, that the reason why the Republicans couldn't give back any of the gas tax, give us a holiday on any of it, was because of their mismanagement under the toll road, giving back the amount of money that we didn't have that we needed to repair our roads. So it's one of those catch-22s. I would very much have been in favor of suspending the gas tax and using some of the budget surplus to handle that. But long term, I definitely agree with Melanie. We've got to figure out some better way than a gas tax, reallocation of funds and figuring out where we can trim the budget in other places to help us with the roads.
All right, thank you. Okay. Next question from the audience. Will you affirm same-sex marriage as legal, even if the Supreme Court were to overturn the Obergefell decision in Mr. Sawinski?
Yes, I would support recognizing same-sex marriage. We're all given one life, one precious life. I don't understand why we would want to judge or make laws that would infringe on somebody's choice on how to live or, live the way that they want to. So yeah, I in favor of, recognizing gay marriage.
Thank you. Ms. Wright.
So there are issues that we're going backwards on. This would be one of them. We know that this might have a closer look at by the Supreme Court. Our state, as a state legislature, with the makeup of it now, it will not vote to do this. I would be a vote to affirm same-sex marriage because, again, I believe that the government should be hands-off, just like I believe they should be hands-off in a school and not micromanage as much. So I believe it's important that when we look at some of these social issues, we have to think about what would we think about if that was somebody that we loved, or somebody in our family, somebody that we're close to, somebody that we admire. And so I think as a state legislator, it's important to really listen and get a feel for how people different than ourselves are and what they're feeling and going through, and be a voice for them as well at the State House.
Thank you. Mr. Bartlett.
Of course, I would vote to affirm the right to have same-sex marriage. Love is love is love is love. And I don't understand why people cannot just accept that because it's different from your definition, that someone else can have another definition. That why we have to, almost out of bigotry, not allow someone to love who they want to love. It makes no sense to me. And yes, I would very much, I would hop at the chance to vote to affirm same-sex marriage if it's overturned at the Supreme Court.
And my answer is the same as what you've already heard. Yes, I would vote to affirm it. Some of you may remember that we had a constitutional amendment proposal in the legislature that would have banned same-sex marriage. But in the end, it failed because the people rose up and said, this is not what we want for Indiana. Indiana is a friendly state, and this is a type of bill that, or constitutional amendment, that is not what we represent. I think we do have to be concerned about what happens with the Supreme Court, because Justice Thomas has already told us he thinks there are some other things that, in addition to Roe v. Wade, that need to be looked at again. So it's sort of, contraception, I think, is also on his chopping block.
Thank you. Next question. What can the Indiana legislature do to support better pay equity and working conditions for women? And Ms. Wright, you can go first.
Okay, so this would be affected more by the people who are, it depends on if you have a government job or you don't have a government job. But I do think that we do need to take a look at that and study that more in order to see if we can actively work towards that, because that has been proven over and over again that women make far less than their counterparts. And so I think anything that we could do to shore up that difference would be terrific. And actually, we haven't really, the 6 years I was there, we haven't really taken that issue on. I was trying to think about any bill that we probably had, but we maybe had a couple of amendments that addressed that, but they were immediately shot down, because usually it's the minority that brings the argumentative or to the debate on the floor, and they did not get through. But we definitely need to take a look at that in the long run.
Mr. Bartlett.
We reached the number of states required to pass the ERA a few years ago, like in the last 3 or 4 years. Why the federal government hasn't recognized the ERA, it confuses me. They've refused to call it in. But here at the state level, like Melanie said, it hasn't been brought up, it hasn't been talked about, but it needs to be. We need to be discussing ways of what laws we can pass to make women's pay equal. If women are doing the same work as men, they should be getting the same pay. And we need to be looking at what we can do to enforce something like that, both at the private and public levels.
Thanks.
Well, actually, I and some other people have introduced pay equity bills to try to narrow that gender pay gap. But why has nobody heard of them? Because the chair of the Labor Committee won't even give them a hearing. And so that's part of the problem, is that some of these important issues just don't get heard. I think if we could air them in public, we might see some progress.
Thank you.
I think there needs to be more women in management, especially in public service and public areas. It really needs to be a top-down sort of change, just because I believe if there are the managers who are, older, of an older generation and male, they are more likely to probably hire a male. And so if there's more women in management, then there's more likelihood of sort of an equal hiring process. Also, more transparency. It's difficult to know everything about the situation without having, everybody's pay salaries, but that seems like it would be somewhat of a invasion of privacy. But there should be some sort of transparency so that we can make sure, that everybody's being paid on an equal footing.
Thank you. Another education question. There have been proposals to have school board candidates declare a party affiliation as opposed to just running nonpartisan as they do now. What are your views on those sort of proposals? And Mr. Bartlett, you can go first.
Well, I will tell you that my opponent is the one who authored that bill. In this last session, he signed his name as the author. School board is one of those things that needs to be above politics. It needs to be out of the party affiliation. The school board members associations have said that. The superintendents have said that. Why we're not listening to the educators, the school board members who want that, why we aren't listening confuses me. We need to be listening to our educators and do what they need. Use their opinions.
Well, I serve on the House Elections Committee, and that's where this bill was filed. And when that bill was heard, the room was packed with school board members. Some of them Democrats, some of them Republicans. And they all said, this is a bad idea. In fact, some of them, and they were Republicans, said, if this passes, I will resign. And they talked about how the kinds of decisions that board members need to make. And you need to have a spirit of, of cooperation and continue, and being together. And they saw this as a way to drive a wedge between school board members, and they felt we wouldn't be able to get our work done. So the bill did not get a vote in the hearing, and I suspect it's not going to come back.
Thank you.
The school board's such a very important role in the community that if you put, the letter of the party next to the candidate, it almost removes any kind of research that you would have to do to meet the candidate and understand what they're all about. And with school board candidates especially, you should know them. They should be a part of your community. The Alexandria School Board, we work with the library, we work very well with the schools. We know, who is on the board. We know that we can go to them if we have any issues. They know that they can come to us if they have any issues. There is no lack of communication between us, and that's somewhat how it should be, I would feel. So,
thank you.
I vehemently disagree with this bill. I just feel like no one should have to determine a party to run for school board. School board is just part of the community schools, and that is the hub of the community, especially in some of our smaller areas that surround Muncie. That's where people go for their Friday night ball games, and then they talk about it at the diner on the next morning. We absolutely are driving a wedge when we ask people to choose a party for school board. And I'm going to point to this on a national level. There are organizations that are affecting school choice that are coming in and making some school board races contested, not by party affiliation, but by money. And then they're coming in and they're taking over a whole philosophical move on the school board and therefore affecting that corporation. Because again, there's a national drive to privatize public education, and this is just another factor that they're going to use to do that.
Thank you. Okay, one last question before we go to the closing statements. And so we'll ask, how do you propose to improve life for Hoosiers here in Indiana, from the General Assembly? And Ms. Arrington, you can go first.
I think we need to look at our priorities and put people first. And that goes into what is it that passes out of the General Assembly. Are we passing the kind of legislation that will attract young people to our state? When you look at some of these recent things we've passed, I would say no. Are we passing legislation that raises up education, not just from K-12, but also for our universities and colleges, and pre-K for that matter? Those are the kinds of things that I think we need to do to make our state a place where people want to live and work.
Thank you.
I would hope that, to give them the hope that they'll be heard. The recent bills have been so divisive that I feel like everybody is in one corner or the other. And in the end, we're all Hoosiers, we're all Americans, and we all live in the same communities. We need to start getting back to, understanding and communicating with one another without having a law passed about every time that you do that. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Wright.
Okay, so if we just go back to just listening to people, I know throughout the course of just running for office, I've knocked on thousands of doors all over Madison and Delaware County and now Randolph counties. And at every door, people have one core issue that drives them. And so they just want somebody to listen to them. And so just by listening at all those doors, I found it was so easy to vote because I found that there was a consistency in their messaging. And also, we need to listen and actively seek in the professional field too. We're not seeking any advice. For instance, in schools, we're not seeking advice from superintendents and principals. You would think that we would, but we do not. We go through their organizations and kind of work out a solution that they work with, but some of them are too afraid to speak up because they don't want a target on their back either. And it really okay.
All right. Mr. Bartlett.
This, I've mentioned a few things before about this. As I drive through the communities and I see the decay of the small towns, I'm in a very rural district, okay? So as I'm driving through these small towns that I used to live in and I see the decay and things, I started questioning what was going on, and I just took a look at population, and all of the counties in my district, or all the areas in my district, have lost between 15 and 25% of their population over the last 40 years. And being in IT, and we have a unique opportunity right now to for people working from home. However, we could get people to move back here if we supply rural broadband internet service that's reliable. And I think that if we supplied that, people could work from the cornfields as well as they could from the cul-de-sacs, and we could rebuild our population back out here.
Thank you. Okay, so to wrap up the forum, each candidate may make a 2-minute closing statement, and Mr. Sawinski, you may go first.
When it comes down to it, The reason that I got involved in the race is because I care about the community. Again, the challenges to the books, the hardships that were, threatened towards teachers with House Bill 40, or House Bill 1040, Senate Bill 17. My opponent voted in favor of those, despite the wishes of, the teachers' unions, the individual teachers too. I don't think I met one that actually had a good thing to say about those bills. And so, again, I don't know who she would be listening to. She should be accountable to the voters. And again, it's kind of irritating that she is not present today to discuss it. But I am here to listen, so thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Wright.
So my number one thing is I love working with constituents, and that's one thing I discovered just, again, from knocking on so many doors over the years and just being able to form relationships with all different kinds of people, different parties, whether it be independent, Republican, or Democrat. It's just very important to me that they knew that they had a friend in the State House, and I would pass out my cell phone number. It's been out there for years. It's never been abused one time. So I actively seek input, and I think that's incredibly important. I'm also fiscally conservative. I mean, it wasn't until I really started following the votes in education that made me really think about what party I stood with. But being a fiscal conservative is very important to me, because I think if there's ways that we can save money and shore up budgets, that's incredibly important, especially because we owe that back to all of the Hoosiers in Indiana. And then also, I think that taking a whole different approach to state government and trying it as a problem-solving unit instead of just trying to appease different lobbying groups is more important, because we're really not listening to just the individual people who are out there working hard every day for their families. I also appreciate being a servant leader as a teacher, and I really enjoyed it as a state representative. And I will tell you, I miss that. I miss it because I was active in the community and I was present. And I think it's important to have somebody who is present and shows up. And I hope that you think that too, because I would rather have somebody who shows up and I can have a disagreement with about a policy than somebody who just doesn't. And that's why I ran in the first place. I wanted to be a person who shows up and who serves people. And I would like to do that again as the state senator for District 26.
Thank you. Mr. Bartlett.
In the last question, I started what I wanted to do with economic growth. I want economic growth to come back to our small towns through broadband internet access, getting people to move back, improving our communities. Other issues that I haven't been able to touch on are the small family farms that are going under at unbelievable rates. Small family farms are going under because there are 4 corporations that control every market that they have to deal in, whether it be their goods, on what they get for their markets. 4 corporations are controlling 75% of those markets. 4 corporations are controlling 75% on what they have to buy to be farmers. That's called monopolization, and we need to do what we can to get the federal government to enforce the antitrust laws and shore up the failing family farms. We talked about what I would like to see with education, what I'd like to do with teachers. We talked about cannabis, and I'm surprised that question didn't come to us. But my district shares 35 miles of border with a state where cannabis is legal. It's here already. We need to legalize it, tax it, and regulate it. I don't understand why we're not considering that, why the governor won't even consider doing that, but that's what needs to happen. Like what Melanie says, I'm a servant. I go to people. I go to where people are. I've been working at the food banks and the tailgates and food pantries, helping people in hunger, living in hunger, overcome hunger. I grew up on a farm. I was raised by union members. I was raised by, my father worked over here at Chevy and in the GM plants for years. So I'm one of you.
Thank you.
In
Ms.
my
Erickson.
closing statements, I'd like to bring up two things that I think go to the heart of what you as voters are looking for in a legislator. The first point is that I have served in the minority for my entire time in the General Assembly. In fact, some people ask me, how do you stand it? Sometimes I ask myself that. But you know, being in the minority teaches you to keep in there and keep fighting. It teaches you that you can't do everything yourself, that you have to work across the aisle and find allies that agree with you on whatever bill it is. It teaches you to not give up, to stay in those trenches and keep progress moving, even if it's not going as quickly as you would like. And you also learn that it doesn't matter who gets the credit, so long as the job gets done. The second point I'd like to bring up is one that Melanie and John have already said something about. And that is, when I ran for county council, I promised the voters that I would be open, accessible, and accountable. And I believe that those principles are still important, and they're what guide me as a candidate and as a legislator. It is important to show up, to engage with the public, like we're doing tonight, to listen to your questions and your concerns, and to share our views with you. Because really, what we do as legislators, it affects you as the public.
Time, please. Okay. Thank you all for participating this evening. Let's have a big round of applause for our candidates. And thank you to the audience for your participation and questions. And I'd like to thank Muncie Central High School for hosting us tonight, all volunteers, team members that put this together, and want to acknowledge WIPB and WIPB Radio for their support in making these forums widely available, even for people who can't be here. Finally, I'd like to encourage everyone to register to vote if you haven't already done so. And if you are registered, then this is a good time to check your registration and make sure all your information is up to date before voting starts. The League of Women Voters volunteers have registration information in the lobby, along with information about taking MITs to the BMV to get a voter ID if you need that. This was our final forum before the election, but a link to the recordings of the forums will be available on our website, communitycandidateforums.com, within a few days. So tell your friends who couldn't make it here in person, they can still get to watch it. Thank you, and good night.
It was just good what you said.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate you being involved with the changes.